Good evening. I'm Nathaniel Dueck, filling in for Nima Rajan, and this is Forum Daily for Wednesday, February 8th. We begin the newscast tonight with tragedy in Quebec. Police in Laval, north of Montreal, confirmed 2 children are dead and 6 others in hospital after a city bus crashed into a daycare this morning. A spokesperson says the 51-year-old bus driver has been arrested and is facing charges of homicide and dangerous driving. One witness told reporters that he and 3 other bystanders managed to subdue the driver, who had removed all his clothing and begun screaming after he exited the bus. Police are still trying to determine a motive. The federal health minister says it will largely be up to the public to hold provinces accountable for meeting the goals of Ottawa's proposed healthcare deal. The federal offer presented to the premiers Tuesday would see transfers to the provinces rise by $196 billion over the next 10 years. Now, the proposal falls well short of what provinces were demanding. The offer includes $25 billion for tailored deals for each province to target major healthcare issues on condition that they provide a plan, set measurable targets, and report publicly on their progress. Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre echoed criticisms from some premiers that Prime Minister Justin Trudeau's healthcare funding offer fell short. But he has pledged to honor the Prime Minister's healthcare funding offer to them. Mr. Poilievre made the promise after Mr. Trudeau offered to increase the healthcare transfer by $17 billion more than previous commitments. Well, according to a new report, the Prairie stands to benefit the most from Canada's boost to its immigration target. The Desjardins analysis finds Alberta, Saskatchewan, and Manitoba would see the biggest boost in GDP growth among the provinces. Principal economist Marc Desmarais says that's because those provinces have higher labor market participation rates. They were also the first to embrace provincial nominee programs, which allow provinces to select immigrants to match their economic needs. Another international event is at risk because Canada's visa processing speeds. A global conference set to take place in Montreal next month is at risk of being derailed by Canada's delays in processing visas and rejections. 6,000 people are supposed to attend the conference, hosted by the Connecticut-based International Studies Association. But hundreds have either been denied visas or are unable to get their applications processed in time. A UN Biodiversity Summit last December in Montreal was also affected by a similar visa issue that prevented delegates from developing countries from attending. The federal government is being urged to follow through with an election promise to develop a Black Canadian justice strategy. Mukisa Kakembo, a lawyer with the prisoner advocacy group Path Legal in Nova Scotia, says it's important the government recognizes systemic racism is one reason why Black Canadians are overrepresented in Canada's criminal justice system. Justice Minister David Lameddi's office says he will have more to say on this soon. The union representing WestJet pilots says contract negotiations with the airline have been unproductive and federal conciliation may be needed to avert a strike. ALPA Canada, which represents about 1,800 pilots at WestJet and its low-cost subsidiary Swoop, says it has been negotiating unsuccessfully with the Calgary-based company since September. WestJet says it remains focused on successfully working with ALPA to reach an agreement. Turning to auto sales markets now, where experts say consumers aren't likely to get quick relief from a sharp jump in prices for gas-powered vehicles. Now, this is despite high-profile reductions for some of the most well-known electric cars this year. A recent Scotiabank report said the average selling price of a new vehicle is running at about $45,500, more than 30% higher than in 2019. Sam Fiorani of Auto Forecast Solutions says price cuts for electric vehicles are related to specific factors in that market as competition increases. But he says there's very little competition on price for gas-powered vehicles amid a parts shortage following the pandemic. Netflix Canada is rolling out its long-anticipated plans to crack down on password sharing. The streaming giant says it will begin notifying Canadian users today by email about limitations on who can access their account from outside their household. Under the new rules, premium and standard account holders can add extra members for $7.99 per month. The Canadian Museum of Immigration at Pier 21 in Halifax is announcing the opening of 2 exhibitions that look at the topic of people interned during world conflicts. One of the exhibits looks at the internment of about 8,600 men, mainly Ukrainian and German immigrants, as a result of the First World War. A second exhibit explores the forced displacement of thousands of Japanese Canadians in the Second World War, following the history of 7 families. These exhibits begin next week. Well, Forum Daily will be right back after the break. And when we return, we're going to take a look at cholera outbreaks in Africa and around the world. We'll have a conversation with Dr. Abhishek Raut, Medical Director at Appletree Medical Group, up next. And after that, of course, we'll have news from around the United States and around the world. So stay tuned, Forum Daily. We'll be right back after a short break. Be sure to stay with us. We'll be right back. Africa's public health agency says many of the continent's countries have no immediate access to cholera vaccines amid deadly outbreaks. Last week, the acting director of the Africa Centers for Disease Control and Prevention said the agency is working with the World Health Organization and Vaccine Alliance Gavi on ways to get more vaccine doses. WHO and partner agencies recommended in October that countries temporarily switch to using a single dose. Since the start of the year, Africa has seen more than 27,000 new cases of cholera, including over 700 reported deaths, most of them in the southern country of Malawi. Joining us to discuss cholera is Dr. Abhishek Raut, Medical Director at Appletree Medical Group. Dr. Raut, welcome to Forum Daily.
Thanks for having me, Nathaniel.
So I suppose we should start with this. What is cholera?
So cholera is a bacterial disease, and it's usually spread through contaminated water. Cholera does cause severe diarrhea and dehydration, and if we don't treat that right away, it can actually be fatal quite quickly, sometimes even in hours, and in quite healthy people. Estimated even today, about 1.3 to 4 million people do get cholera each year, and about 20,000 to 140,000 die from it. Now, modern sewage and water treatment has eliminated cholera in most industrialized countries, but it still definitely exists in many countries, especially in Malawi during this outbreak.
So what do we see as the symptoms of cholera? How can one know they have cholera?
Right. So most people exposed to the cholera bacterium don't really become ill and don't know they've been infected, but they can certainly spread it. So it spreads in the stool for 7 to 14 days, and they can infect others through the contaminated water. But if you do have symptoms, what we do find is that starts with mild to moderate diarrhea. That's hard to tell apart from other problems, but then you can start getting more severe signs as well. In fact, 1 in 10 people will get quite sick with severe cholera and have severe issues such as watery diarrhea, vomiting, leg cramps, and if we don't get fluid in to those people without adequate treatment, you can see death occurring quite quickly.
I know you mentioned spreads through water, and modern water treatment facilities help eliminate that, but are there other ways cholera can spread besides through water?
Right. So basically, we're talking about water, but surface or well water are a particular high risk for people eating seafood. Raw or undercooked seafood is at high risk as well. Raw fruits and vegetables, so raw unpeeled fruits and vegetables are a very frequent source. And grains, so places where grains such as rice and millet are contaminated, even after cooking, kept in room temperature for several hours, can grow that cholera bacteria.
Now, treatment. I guess we need to move on to treatment now. It's we know that Africa's CDC is calling for more vaccines. So what are some other ways to prevent the spread of cholera?
I think the important things to decrease that is to drink only safe water, make sure you're washing your hands with soap frequently, and eating food that's completely cooked and hot, avoiding improperly cooked food and seafood, and sticking to fruits and vegetables that you can peel yourself.
Now, we know the WHO Director General says that we're looking at the 50% increase in recent years of cholera cases, 31 countries since December. So what are some of the reasons we're seeing a spike in cholera outbreaks worldwide?
Right. Well, what we're seeing worldwide is definitely some warmer temperatures, increased rains that are making it easier for bacteria that cause cholera to multiply and spread. We know about 14 African countries are reporting cholera cases, and many of them are due to flooding that we're seeing across the continent there as well. And about 1.3 billion people there still lack access to safe water, sanitation, and that certainly worsens the issue.
Now, bringing it back home here, cholera was a deadly disease in Canada during the 1800s, with outbreaks leading to at least 20,000 deaths, possibly more. But what is the status of cholera in Canada today?
Right. We're very lucky. We live in a very good industrialized nation. It's a very rare disease in Canada. Just as an example, since 2012, less than 20 cases of cholera have been reported in the province of Ontario, and a majority of those cases were related to travel outside the country to begin with.
It's interesting to bring up travel. So let's suppose somebody goes abroad and contracts cholera. What steps are they required to take upon their return?
Right. So I think the important thing is to recognize that if you are having that diarrhea, to see a healthcare provider. You can get oral rehydration packets from a local pharmacy. But if you have severe diarrhea or you think you might be exposed to cholera, get that treatment right away. So severe dehydration is a medical emergency and it requires immediate care with IV fluids.
Hydration. Wonderful. Well, thank you, Dr. Raut. We appreciate your time on Forum Daily as well.
Thanks so much.
Right. We'll be right back after the break. And when we return, we're going to be taking a look at the major news stories and headlines out of the United States. We'll have more on President Biden's State of the Union address and reaction to it. The U.S. Federal Reserve Chair is warning that the key rate may have to rise higher than expected if jobs continue to strengthen, and lawmakers consider restricting foreign ownership of farmland amid a balloon incident. Stay tuned. We'll be right back. On Tuesday night, U.S. President Joe Biden addressed a joint session of Congress for the first time since voters handed control of the House to Republicans in November's midterm elections. Facing a divided Congress in a bitterly partisan Washington, Mr. Biden nevertheless made the hopeful appeal in his State of the Union address for the parties to work together. He said the American electorate is uninterested in its elected leaders fighting for the sake of fighting. He called for unity and appeared to emphasize conciliation over conflict. While offering up the official Republican rebuttal to the State of the Union address, Arkansas Governor Sarah Huckabee Sanders painted a dystopian portrait of the country. Leaning heavily into Republican culture war issues, she accused Mr. Biden and the Democrats of pursuing so-called woke fantasies. Speaking from the governor's mansion in Little Rock, Ms. Sanders warned of a nation whose ideals are under attack and whose citizens need to fight for their freedom. Well, amid ongoing economic turmoil, the Federal Reserve Chair is warning that more interest rate hikes might be needed. Making his remarks at the Economic Club of Washington on Tuesday, Jerome Powell said that if the U.S. job market further strengthens in the coming months or inflation readings accelerate, the Fed may have to raise its benchmark interest rate higher than it currently projects. Mr. Powell's remarks followed the government's blockbuster report last week that employers added 517,000 jobs in January, nearly double December's gain. The unemployment rate fell to its lowest level in 53 years to 3.4%. Well, meanwhile, the fallout over an air balloon from China continues to make an impact in the United States. U.S. lawmakers in Congress and at least 11 state houses are weighing legislation to further limit foreign ownership of farmland, following trade disputes and espionage fears stoked by what U.S. authorities are calling a Chinese spy balloon shot down off the Atlantic coast. The proposals were introduced earlier this month out of concern for long-term food security and land potentially being used as a perch for spying, the claim getting more attention after the air balloon crossed over the U.S. The efforts reflect how worries about Chinese influence have expanded beyond Washington, D.C. Well, staying in Washington, D.C. now, where Canada's defense and economic ministers are meeting with lawmakers and military contractors this week. Their goal is to tout the benefits of cross-border collaboration. Defense Minister Anita Nan says last week's encounter with what U.S. officials insist was a Chinese spy balloon illustrates the urgent need to modernize NORAD, the Joint Command Continental Defense System. Turning to the latest developments in the violent arrest and subsequent death of Tyree Nichols. Documents on last month's arrest show that one of the officers involved took pictures and shared them. The documents, released yesterday, provided a scathing account of what authorities called the blatantly unprofessional conduct of 5 officers during the arrest, which left Mr. Nichols beaten and bloodied. As many as 13 Memphis officers could end up being disciplined, including the 5 charged with murder in Mr. Nichols' death. A former actor in the Oscar-winning 1990 film Dances with Wolves is now facing a charge in British Columbia, alongside 8 other sex-related charges in Nevada. Documents filed in BC's southern interior show 46-year-old Nathan Chasinghorse was charged last week with sexual assault linked to allegations in the village of Karamias in September 2018. RCMP say an unendorsed warrant was posted in BC for Mr. Chasinghorse. Meantime, the Tsuut'ina Police Force, a First Nation force west of Calgary, says it has also received several tips about the jailed Mr. Chasinghorse. Well, after a fiery train derailment days ago in Ohio, concerns over toxic gases remain in the air, lingering for some residents in some neighborhoods. Crews released and burned toxic chemicals transported by the wrecked train on Monday near East Palestine, which has been evacuated over the threat of explosions. Residents in the immediate area there and nearby in Pennsylvania have been told they cannot return to their homes today. The NBA has a new all-time leading scorer. LA Lakers superstar LeBron James scored his 38,000th, 388th career point last night. He tops a record set by Kareem Abdul-Jabbar back in 1984. The Lakers paused the game against the Oklahoma City Thunder for a ceremony. LeBron James had tears in his eyes as he thanked the crowd, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, the NBA commissioner, and others. Well, in the run-up to the NFL's biggest game of the year, big-name advertisers from Netflix to Google are paying as much as $7 million for a 30-second spot during the Super Bowl on Sunday. In order to get as much of a return on their investment for those millions, most advertisers release their ads in the days ahead of the big game in order to get the most publicity for their spots. Some ads released early, actor Miles Teller dances to customer service music for Bud Light, Will Ferrell crashes popular show Bridgerton in a joint Netflix GM ad, and Alicia Silverstone returns with her clueless character for Rakuten. Well, Forum Daily will be right back after the break with a look at news from around the world, so stay with us. We'll be right back here on Forum Daily after a short break. More than 11,000 people have now been confirmed dead in the aftermath of Monday's devastating 7.8 magnitude earthquake that struck Turkey and Syria. Search and rescue operations, including teams from over 20 countries, continue to search through the rubble for survivors. Many people are awaiting help, but experts warn the survival window for those trapped under the rubble is rapidly closing. The Canadian government says it will contribute $10 million in relief efforts in Syria and Turkey as part of an initial aid package. Well, it was a daring visit to the United Kingdom today for Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky. The embattled leader made a dramatic speech before the UK Parliament, where he pushed for more warplanes for his country while thanking the British people for their support since the start of Russia's invasion of Ukraine. He later met with King Charles. The UK is one of the biggest military backers of Ukraine and has sent the country more than £2 billion in weapons and equipment. On the other side of the channel, hundreds of farmers drove their tractors through Paris on Wednesday in protest of banned pesticides. The convoy entered the French capital through a southern gateway and made its way to the gold-domed Invalides Monument, site of Napoleon's tomb. They're protesting the French government's decision last month to ban the use of pesticides on sugar beets and other crops. The choice of Napoleon's monument as the site of their protest was significant, as he imported sugar beets from Poland to ensure France's sugar independence. Amid a surge in cybercrime, Spain's government has pledged stronger action. Cybercrime has come to account for about a fifth of all offenses registered in the country. The country's interior minister said police would be given additional staff, funding, and resources to address online crime. He said Wednesday that reported cases of cybercrime were up 72% last year compared to 2019 and 352% compared to 2015. On Tuesday, Spain's defense minister approved the creation of a new military cyber operations training school to further reinforce national security online. An international team of investigators says it has insufficient evidence to launch any new prosecutions in the downing of the Malaysia Airlines Flight 17 over eastern Ukraine in 2014. Dutch police official Andy Krag says the case has gone as far as it can go. The announcement comes nearly 3 months after a Dutch court convicted 2 Russians and a Ukrainian rebel for their roles in shooting down the plane and killing 298 people, including a Canadian from Ajax, Ontario. Over to South Korea now, where the opposition-controlled parliament has voted to impeach the country's interior and safety minister, Lee Sang-min. They are holding him responsible for government failures in disaster planning and the response that likely worsened a crowd crush that killed nearly 160 people in October. The impeachment Wednesday suspends Mr. Lee from his duties. The country's constitutional court has 180 days to rule on whether to formally unseat him or reinstate him to his job. He is seen as a key ally of Conservative President Yoon Suk-yeol, whose office issued a statement accusing opposition lawmakers of abandoning legislative principles and creating shameful history. Well, meanwhile, Ugandan authorities say they will not renew the mandate of the United Nations Human Rights Office in the East African country. The move effectively blocks the group's operations at a time of heightened concerns over rights abuses. In a February 3rd notice to the Office of the UN High Commissioner for Human Rights in Kampala, the The Ministry of Foreign Affairs asserted that local authorities have the capacity to monitor the promotion and protection of human rights throughout the country. The UN Rights Office in Kampala has been the scene in some recent years of protests by activists and others trying to highlight rights violations perpetrated by Ugandan state agents. The Walt Disney Company has removed an episode from its cartoon series The Simpsons from its streaming service in Hong Kong. The episode One Angry Lisa from The Simpsons' 34th season is not listed for the Disney Plus streaming service in Hong Kong, as it includes a reference to forced labor camps in China. In it, character Marge Simpson takes a virtual spin class whose instructor, while in front of a virtual background showing the Great Wall of China, says, quote, "Behold the wonders of China, Bitcoin mines, forced labor camps where children make smartphones." Well, visitors to one of Florence's most iconic monuments are getting a once-in-a-lifetime chance to see its ceiling mosaics up close thanks to an innovative approach to a planned restoration effort. The baptistry of San Giovanni, opposite the city's Duomo, is undergoing a 6-year cleaning and restoration. Now, rather than fully limiting access, officials have built a scaffolding platform for the art restorers that will also allow a small number of visitors to see the mosaics at eye level. Visits begin February 24th. Something to see there for sure. I'm Nathaniel Dueck, filling in for Nima Rajan, and that'll do it for your look at national and international news for today on Forum Daily. Remember, for more news on demand, you can always visit our website, thenewsforum.ca, and make sure to follow us on our social media handles. You can find us on Facebook, TikTok, Instagram, and Twitter. You can also watch our content on the News Forum YouTube channel. Thanks for joining us tonight on Forum Daily News, and we'll see you next time. Be well.